My name is Pastor James O'Hara. I am a Baptist preacher up in northern Maine. I felt the God call on my life years and years ago as a young man, as a young child, matter of fact. The first time I was in church, I was in Bible school. And I went to Bible school part of the week, and I kept looking at that pastor. And I said, gee, maybe someday I could be a pastor. Just a thought that come into my mind, not realizing it was God that put that thought in there. And then a few years later, I got into the Boy Scouts, and I had to earn a badge. Part of the requirements to earning that badge was going to church twice, 2 Sundays. So I did go. And while I was there, I heard the gospel message. And they had an altar call, and I knew what I should do. I knew I should go down front and receive Christ as Savior. But I rejected it. I rejected the message. And left that church and never went back for years. Because I got into my teenage years and got living the life, the wild side of things, you might say. My mother and father got saved, had joined a church, and they invited that preacher up to speak to me about the gospel. I knew what I should do, but I rejected it again. I run. Didn't run long till God stopped me. I got into a car accident, ended up in the hospital. Had spent all my money that night on booze. Didn't have nothing left. And I was laying in that hospital bed, and that old Baptist preacher came in, and he gave me the gospel message. I was ready. I was ready to receive it then. I received Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior in that hospital room. And that preacher jumped up and praised the Lord. What a joyous feeling that was, to accept Christ as my Savior. Well, then I started going to church, that same preacher's church. And I went a few Sundays and had witnessed to a few people, and they got saved that Sunday. And out through the door I walked. The preacher grabbed my hand, shook my hand. He said, "You ever thought about being a preacher?" And I said, no way, I didn't want that. No, I didn't want that. But I had thought about it. That was God speaking to me. And then I left that church. A few years later, I went to another church. And other churches. And I came back to the same church that I went to Bible school. In First Church, I heard the gospel message from. God brought me back. And that preacher was up in an age, and he asked me, "You ever thought about being a preacher?" And I give in. I had. Many times over my life. And the direction of my life headed in that direction. Many circumstances pointed to me being a preacher. So I accepted the call of preaching. And I preached in that church, and I'm preaching in that church today. I preached there over 24 years. God put a desire in my heart to be a preacher. And everything in my life pointed to that direction. And I accepted the call of God to preach His Word. And that's what I'm doing today. And if you see me on YouTube here, you know that I'm doing it because God called me. Thank you all, and God bless you all.